periodically we see stories, the Peter King hearings on Muslims in America, or at least, shall I say, extremism on some of the incidents that have happened. We did talk with Philly CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, about that. They're back with us today because there were several items out there yesterday, particularly in the Jersey and New York newspapers, saying that due to the FBI and I guess other police agencies, engaging in overkill in investigating in the Muslim community and mosques and the like, various Muslim leaders were taking the stance to have people not come forward with what might be potentially terrorist elements in the community. Joining us is the executive director of CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, Philadelphia. Moein Khawaja is back with us on the Dom Giordano program. Moein, welcome back in. Good to have you.
Thanks a lot, Dom. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you've seen these reports too. At least one was the national group and the New York group and professors at various universities throughout that area saying essentially do not cooperate with the FBI when it comes to this. Or do you support that?
Well, not in the way you said it. If there's any imminent threat of anybody doing any wrongdoing, it's your absolute civic duty to call that in.
Well, you said imminent, though. Tell me what the distinction is.
Well, the distinction, I think, is that especially the Muslim community in New York, they feel that, well, they are being spied upon and interrogated for things that just for being there. For example, we had a lot of kids from MSAs, which is the Muslim Students Associations at various campuses. And these organizations are basically frats and sororities for Muslim kids, and they'd get approached like, oh, how often do you pray? What mosque do you go to? And then some of these kids are asked to become informants, to spy on mosques and their own friends. And look, the bottom line is these communities have been in New York for decades before 9/11. So if terrorism 9/11 came from them, peaceful Muslim Americans living in New York, how come it didn't happen in 1961, 1971?
Okay, I would ask, though, what's the harm here, given, would we agree that the numbers of these incidents that are coming out of the Muslim community are very significant versus the smaller numbers of Muslims in New York or in any area?
Right. Well, look, we almost had a big incident, for example, in Times Square. I mean, the only reason that that bomb didn't go off was because the guy, couldn't tie a couple of wires together, right? It was very close, and we could have lost hundreds of people. It would have been terrible. And that's exactly the premise that I come from. Our law enforcement resources are finite, and we've got to use those resources on people, Muslim or not, who are out to
but how would we know that? How did we know that, Moein? Unless I'll tell you straight up and tell me what's wrong with this. Mm-hmm. I think law enforcement is correct to try to infiltrate mosques.
Well, tell me then why every single mosque in New York, even surrounding New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, was watched, and they missed this guy Faisal Shahzad who tried to blow up Times Square. Why? Because he knew we were spying on mosques, and he's just a guy on his basement getting radicalized over the internet. We ought to watch people like that who make extremely high volume propane purchases, for example, who are online.
Well, wait a minute. Is your argument is, though, if we're watching the mosque, we can't watch that also?
My argument is we have finite resources, and we're spying on innocent people who really have been here for decades and are trying to make a home here, and have made homes here, and so we miss people. I mean, again, the key word there is a miss. The bomb in Times Square didn't go off because of the FBI.
Right.
It went off. It didn't go off because, quite frankly, the guy didn't know what he was doing, and we were very, very close.
Well, Moein, what do you think is motivating that then? What is the motivation then? I trust law enforcement in their judgment to try to do what they're able to do to infiltrate so that we have enough stuff out there that there's a tripwire. And the response then to say, well, we're not going to talk to them because we're mad about this, that's just going to exacerbate the feelings that people have that are negative.
Sure, and I can see how that happens. But look, my main point. My main point has always been, I'm just using Times Square as one example. We had the underwear bomber who was also called in by Muslims to say, look, we hear this guy's been radicalized. So people are calling it in. It's just that when you focus on communities that are part of the community, I mean, we're talking about food vendors in New York. Everybody's gotten food from their carts. We're talking about cab drivers. These are people who've decided to live in New York. They've been there for decades, and when we spend time, when we only have 1,000 or 500 FBI agents in New York. Would you rather have them spending time on 500 mosques that haven't produced a single extremist, or do you want them to investigate the guys in the basement who are going online, getting radicalized, trying to go to websites, figuring out how to make bombs? I think we ought to.
Okay,
go
let me ask one more question before we take some callers for Moein, who is the executive director of CAIR-Philadelphia. So what is it explicitly then that CAIR, you guys are advising Muslim citizens not to do? You've told us, if it's an imminent threat, et cetera, and all. But it's in the news because there's a guy at the academic level, and there's also CAIR nationally. What are you advising them not to do in protest, if you will, to this?
Well, we've found that people who speak to the FBI in particular without an attorney, and it's their constitutional right to an attorney. The American Bar Association always says when speaking with federal agents have an attorney, we say if they need to talk to you, don't create obstacles for them. Just say, listen, I need my attorney. I need that person there. That way, when you have an attorney, the attorney focuses the FBI's attention on real things that need to be sought out, rather than how often you go to a mosque to pray or things like that don't have anything to do with radicalization itself.
Well, wait a minute. It seems that, Moein, I might say that you're slowing down and taking resources by having to wait, set up formal meetings with attorneys around this, rather than getting a lay of the land and, the FBI doing some of these quick background checks or the things that they're engaged in.
Right. Well, the Constitution says that we have that right, and it's not about just rights. It's about, I firmly believe, slowing down or not, we can refocus our law enforcement on the right individuals, and we just want to make sure that innocent folks don't get trapped and wrapped up.
Okay. Can you stand by, Moein, and take a couple callers?
Sure thing.
I'll put you on hold. All right. Moein Khawaja, who is the executive director of Philly CAIR, jump in, and here we have to me, this is short-sighted. It's just going to increase the number of people that are suspect and wondering about a community and what goes on there. Or is he right? They should have an attorney present, and you don't have to answer any of these questions that the FBI is nosing around about. 855-839-1210. AT&T and Verizon Wireless, push pound 1210. You got to jump in now. I'm coming to your calls next with the executive director of CAIR-Philadelphia here on the Dom Show. All right, good Wednesday. Welcome in. You're with Dom. Moein Khawaja, the executive director of CAIR, is with us. We're breaking down some of the stuff that's going on, coming, the Peter King kind of thing. But recently, there's this movement. You heard what Moein's position is versus mine around the FBI and infiltrating the Muslim community around acts of terror or potential acts of terror. Let's go back to Moein and let's go to the callers. Let's go to Warren in Northeast Philadelphia. Hey, Warren, good morning. Welcome in.
Morning. I got a couple of things. The argument that you're using right now for racially profiling Muslims doesn't hold any water. If you talk to a mathematician, he would tell you that's mathematically, for lack of a better word, dumb.
Well, you know what? I don't know. That's awfully fuzzy math when I think even Moein would sadly say the jihadists that we've seen in the country have identified with a perversion maybe of the Muslim faith, but those are the people that have been doing this, Warren.
Absolutely. But if you listen to the FBI and you get a hold of their statistics, the FBI Bureau of Statistics, they say since 1998, there's been well over 100 domestic acts of terrorism committed by Christian Anglo-Saxon males, yet we're not profiling them.
That's not true. That's not true. The FBI has tried to infiltrate them, has tried to engage in that, and still does that.
But we're not doing it to the extent that
Of course we are. Of course, those numbers are. So that's who you worry about then.
What worries me is that you have a better chance of being harmed in this country by domestic terrorism than you do by foreign terrorists.
Well, I don't think that's accurate, Warren. Thank you very much, Moein. Do you share that? Is that one of the arguments that you would make?
Oh, sure. I totally understand what Warren's saying, but if I could add on to his point. Yeah, sure. There have been plenty of white males and Anglo-Saxon males that have engaged in domestic terrorism, but because the FBI knows they can't interview every single white male or go to every single place white males hang out at, they know that they need to look at the behaviors that lead to such extremism, whether it's strange online rantings or what have you. In the same way, you can spot behaviors amongst Muslim extremists, and you're not going to find that in mosques. You're going to find in their
Well, wait a minute, though, Moein. Is that true? We're not going to find it in mosque. I know that the Fort Dix 5 or 6, whatever it ended up, they met at a mosque right here in South Jersey.
Oh no, sure. They might have passed through a mosque just as they would have passed through a gas station. It doesn't mean just because they went to a gas station.
Wait, Moein, though, you know, I can't name one in this area to be sure about that, so I won't try to do that. But come on now, in New York, you've seen some of these clerics that I don't think you would be supporting that are very, very close to advocating violence. We've seen them routinely profiled in the New York papers. So you mean to say I wouldn't hang out at the mosque of those guys?
Could you give me a name? I mean, I'm really not.
You mean to wait a minute? You mean to say, Moein, I don't have that, and I apologize, I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen 60 Minutes. I've seen other reports of Muslim clerics in the New York area. Well, how about the blind sheikh? How about someone like that before the original attack on the World Trade Center? Should we have been around where he was and what he was proselytizing?
Sure.
Okay,
and that's a great example. And he wasn't a paid staff imam of a mosque. He was a guy who came from overseas. He spent some time in hangouts and apartments and recruited some folks.
Okay, well, let me ask you, Moein, this way then. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to get to the core of this.
Sure.
You mean to say, and I could take a few hours and I can come up with specific names, but these people that I'm talking about, you mean to say there are no, what we would reasonably say are radical clerics that the FBI ought to be looking at in mosques in this country, say in Dearborn and places like that? There's none that you think come to that level.
Look, what's radical speech? If any cleric says harm Americans, don't just look into them, arrest them. But if someone says, the government is wrong for staying in Iraq for too long or too short, what have you, that's freedom. That's free speech. That's something that we are allowed to do, and that we should cherish. That.
Well, absolutely, we're with that. Well, we'll invite you back and we'll lay them out. But I mean, I just wanted you on the record though, because you live this day to day more than I.
Sure.
And again, it's common knowledge that there are clerics. They're featured all over the place in New York, in that Jersey area, that I believe should be watched. That's the only point I was making. Let me go to Kathy and Delco. Kathy, you're with Moein. Go right ahead.
Yes, hi. Why are you focusing, sir, on the guy that got, that didn't succeed in blowing up the bomb in Times Square? Why don't you talk about Major Hassan, who went down to Fort Hood and killed all those, white soldiers?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, Kathy. I'd be glad to drop the Times Square example and focus on Fort Hood. And look, he had all the behavior signs as far as strange rantings on the Internet, emails, his increase in purchase of guns, and other psychiatric signs that I think were overlooked. He did not. If the FBI
Moein, may I intervene? Hold it, Kathy. Moein, may I intervene and say I think the point she might be making, and I would make to you this way, is maybe they weren't overlooked. But sadly, outfits like CAIR, maybe not you, but others, kind of chill even the military. They don't want to be over the top going after a Muslim soldier, and they allowed Hassan, with full knowledge of what he was engaged in, there's a lot of record of that, to ultimately commit these acts.
No, look, Don, every single time a Muslim attempts to do anything crazy, or when it actually happens like Fort Hood, we want that. I mean, it hurts us twice. One, our fellow citizens are killed, and then two, people get sick and tired of Muslims all over again, and the cycle starts all over again. We desperately want these bad guys caught, just as anybody else. We just want to be right.
The guy in Times Square. The guy in Times Square, he did have warning signs with the people that worked around him in the office building where he worked, in computers or something. There were signs that he was a radical. But now since Fort Hood happened, that's why we're concentrating more on what we're hearing from people.
Thanks, Kathy. Let me squeeze one more caller in for you, Moein. Let me go to Joe in media. Joe, you're next with Moein. Go right ahead.
Hello?
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I would be saying is I wouldn't have CAIR or any other organization worrying about where the FBI spends their resources. That's up to them to determine where they need to spend the resources. This is just sort of a little camouflage, like, hey, don't spend it here. They should be spending it there. Let them worry about it. They're the ones that have the responsibility to defend us, and they're the ones that have the ability to do that. And to be afraid of having people talk to Muslims about people who are bad apples in the organization or in the group, it doesn't make any sense to me. You should be wanting to get these bad apples out of the organization and to be concerned that somebody might be stepping on a few toes. Hey, it's better than having somebody blown up.
All right, Joe, hold up there. Let Moein respond. Moein, the point is, the FBI, don't they have the expertise, not CAIR, in determining this?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, Joe, I agree the bad apples, we want them out of the community. We'd like the FBI to step on the right toes, and what I disagree with is saying they have the sole responsibility. I'm a citizen, and I also think I've got the responsibility in using my freedom of speech, my relationships with the FBI, to advocate for better policies that will keep us all safer.
Thank you very much. And Moein, thank you very much. And to be continued, we'll see how this plays out. And I will try to, next time we have on, give you exactly the names of the people that I'm thinking about that I have seen. But thank you for coming on and taking the questions. As always, we invite you back again whenever there's a need.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you very much. All right. Moein Khawaja, Executive Director at